Confessions of an Accountant, where no topic is off the ledger.
So as I described before, I'm a chartered accountant. I've worked in small, medium and large firms since 2003, as I'm sure many of us have. I started my own firm in 2010 and ran it until 2023. It's a fairly small firm. I never sort of got past that very small sort of micro firm and probably didn't want to at the time at all. Overlapping that, I started Xenon Connect, which is software, in 2020, whereby it looks at the data quality of the bookkeeping for accountants and bookkeepers. I always loved the idea of creating systems that made life easier for me within my practice, but I never seemed to get round to actually getting something where I felt this system's complete. And I'm not sure if that sort of exists. However, it was always my intention to feel more comfortable with the systems I'd in place in my own firm. I used to read things, Michael Gerber, E-Myth, I'm sure many of us have read those as well, and all the spin-offs that have come since then from other authors too, that are sort of basing on those concepts. And I loved all that, the idea that I could almost systemise myself out of the firm or just into the bits I wanted to take care of within the firm. So it became more of my choice and gave me a bit of freedom. So hopefully this session will have some topics which spill over into, for example, what Josh does there as well. So it's not just accounting specific, although it will be tailored to accounting or bookkeeping firm, because that's sort of my speciality there. So in terms of systems, I created lots of systems, and really I want to discuss the reasons that I feel that I didn't crack the systemization of my firm. So looking at the problems I had really, and then potentially pointing in the direction of a solution that I feel would have helped me when I was in practice as well. So, I mean, some of these things that they may sort of ring true in your mind. They may sort of resonate with how you do things in your firm or how you have done in the past. And so just have a think about that as we're going through them. As my firm grew, I got massively stressed because more client work means more deadlines and more stress. And I rarely admitted it to other people as well. All the processes were in my head, especially before I had team members. And it was down to me to actually get everything done based on my knowledge and my education at that point in time. There was no sort of external documentation at all to help anybody else coming into the firm actually look at, okay, this is how we do things in this firm. So eventually I took on team members to alleviate that workload. But when I did that, I realized actually it's adding work for me because I didn't have those systems in place to help them as they came into the firm. And I ended up spending a lot of time training them, repetitive training that I tended to keep having to do over and over again. And it wasn't because they weren't capable of doing the things I was asking of them. It's just that they perhaps didn't remember the expectations that I'd given them the last time because there was so much involved that just wasn't documented. So at that point, I started to document things. Initially, it was on Excel spreadsheet, and I'll show some. I dug out some examples of my very first systems, as you might call them, on Excel that I'll show you shortly, just to show you sort of how they differ from what's available nowadays. But we built those checklists and they worked to a certain extent, and team members were able to follow the systems that we had in place. But they always required a lot of maintenance, I felt. And again, when things change, it's just you're constantly maintaining these checklists and they're very static. There's always ambiguity about what needed to be done by team members, and then that meant that accountability and enforcing that accountability that, okay, this team member should be doing this task, but they haven't done it. It was hard to sort of communicate what hadn't been done, if that makes sense, because there wasn't that formal system in place there. And systems definitely felt detached. So that had that spreadsheet and later moved on to sort of cloud, generic cloud task management solutions, and also task solutions that were built into the sort of the final year-end accounts prep software, whether it be desktop or cloud. I was using those from time to time to actually create those recurring tasks and maybe like a short workflow within them. And that was an improvement, it really made it more specific. But again, I was still creating these systems and maintaining them regularly and not having that attachment to the actual work that I was carrying out. It was definitely a separate software system. It always felt separate to the actual work I was doing because it's a separate checklist. So they definitely became a tick box exercise for some team members and probably to myself as well sometimes. It's a case of when things get busy, when deadlines get close, you're just getting through those tasks. You're not going to be ticking all the boxes. Maybe you do that in retrospect after you've done the task and that sort of thing. And it becomes meaningless as a system if it's just a retrospective task of ticking things off. Reviews took a long time. So I had to review that detached system from a reviewer's point of view of what had been done by the preparer, because then you have to go into the ledgers, you have to check that they've done what they said they've done, again, because that data isn't attached there as well. So in my opinion, that's the main problem with systems, even nowadays generally, is that there's that lack of a link between what we are physically doing in terms of within the bookkeeping software itself and that checklist of items that we know we have to do to get that task complete. They're completely separate software generally, and there's no deep link between them. So I just want to show a few slides, just give you some examples of the different types of systems as I see them, if I may. So I'll just share my screen now. So hopefully you're starting to see that come through. So thinking about systems within an accounting or bookkeeping firm, but I'm sure, as I say, there's spillover into other industries as well, because essentially systems are systems. First of all, sometimes systems are just kept in the individual's head. I mean, definitely it was the case for me when I first started out, and even when I started taking on team members at the early stage, the systems were still in my head, and I was sort of training them repetitively. It's like Groundhog Day, just training them over and over again on how to do things, because they just weren't documented. So there's no formal documented process is the main issue here. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of that. I think it's self-explanatory, isn't it, really, that if those systems are only in the head, then there's just so many constraints by having that information locked away there. The next step up in my mind, and this is an example of one of my first sort of just the basic overview of the tasks I had to do at that point in time. I think it's from 2012 or 2013. But yeah, 2013 by the looks of it. So this is a spreadsheet, obviously. It's a digitized but largely static checklist. These are the VAT returns I had to do at that point in time. There were my period ends, and at column D, we had the due date for HMRC just typed in there on column E, and then you've got any notes. So as things happened with that task, that's where I was updating that line essentially, and potentially overwriting what was put there before, potentially just adding on extra notes to it as well. Here's my one for my year-end accounts jobs at the time. There's all the different clients there with the year-end tasks again, similar sort of thing. Static information, color coding needs constantly updating. And there's my self-assessment one as well. So that's the status there in column G with a bit of color coding just to, make sure it's clear when things have been done and just get that visual satisfaction of having everything in green, which is, it can't be underestimated having that sort of list like that and you can see it's all green. But again, it's largely static. And then you move on to the generic cloud software, or it could be desktop software. So if you've got any sort of software whereby you have, it's built for task management, essentially. You might have tasks that you can add there, and then you might have a workflow within those tasks whereby these are the steps that you have to do to complete that particular task. Now, if you're using generic software, it's likely that, take the VAT return example, you're going to have to enter 10, 20, 30 steps within that yourself and build that system out yourself. It's not impossible, but it means it gets old very quick and you have to keep maintaining it as well. Same with any sort of software which is potentially linked to the accounting world, because there's no intrinsic link to what you're doing in terms of the data for a lot of the tasks that we do, especially compliance tasks like VAT returns or year-end accounts and so on. Even for those sort of those systems whereby you've got a task workflow, it doesn't link to that underlying data itself. So there are situations whereby there's a loss of time and a loss of clicks in terms of how to get that task done, because again, you're jumping around from system to system to see where you're up to with that task and to process the task itself as well. But definitely an improvement from the spreadsheets. Hopefully you can agree on that as well. And then this is really what I want to look at. And obviously my background is Xenon Connect, and this is what we can see is a screenshot of Xenon Connect here, essentially this new systemised module we've brought in. And that's probably the reason why I'm on this call with Donna, if we're all honest. However, I don't want to sort of sit here trying to sell it. What I want to differentiate is that there are systems that do a bit more than that cloud software, that desktop software that we'll be used to seeing in terms of task management. Because this middle section here that you can hopefully see is what makes this more powerful. And it's why I call it the embedded cloud. So embedded cloud, in my mind, means that there's relevant data embedded within the workflow itself. So if you're doing a VAT return, one of your steps might be to reconcile a bank account, or it should be, potentially, unless it's a small job. Then this top step here, you can see that the workflow step number 1 is tied in directly to a bank balance check. So this checks whether the bank actually balances for this company as part of that flow there, and it will tell you how many of those banks don't currently balance, tied into the actual bookkeeping software and into the rest of our software in this case as well. So that's what I mean really by having an embedded cloud solution whereby it's a digitized dynamic checklist with that relevant data embedded within it. So hopefully that just gives you an idea of how I see the differences between the two systems and why really there's a lot of power in integrating that data within the steps itself. The number of clicks it takes, for example, to get even just to the bank reconciliation screen within Xero or QuickBooks or Free Agent and Sage and so on, it would be potentially 4 or 5 clicks to get to where you want to get to within that package there. Whereas here, you can just click it and it's embedded within it. It shows you instantly, and it even shows you on the face without any clicks what the status is in terms of number of issues. There's that deep and direct feedback there straight away. Same one with this task 3 here. We've got a check that looks at miscoded suppliers in terms of their tax codes as well. So if you're using inconsistent VAT codes for suppliers, we've got checks to do that sort of thing. And this step here links to that directly within that VAT return review checklist process. So definitely benefit in having that embedded system. I'll just stop. Actually, if I just show you another thing that I've got. I'm not going to go into this into a lot of detail, but it's something I knocked up this morning. I used a bit of ChatGPT, but cross-referenced it to also just other things that I'd found and my own knowledge as well. And this is really comparing these 4 different types of technologies for creating systems. And what I'll do is I'll just pop a link to this in the chat, if I may, Donna, just so if anybody wants to download this as a bit of an idea of, the different types of systems here. I'll just pop that in there now. So that's just a PDF, a 1-pager, just to show you how I feel the main technologies for creating systems differ. So obviously in your head, I'm not going to go through all these in detail. If your systems are in your head, there's lots of red there. That means that for these particular areas within that system, it's perhaps not as effective as it could be because of your choice of technology in terms of what you've used here. Spreadsheet, again, see a bit more orange there, bit of green as well. Generic cloud, lots more green there. So we'll step up from the spreadsheet side of things, and an embedded cloud. Now we've still got some orange sections, and this is very much tailored to how I feel. So there is an element of subjectivity. Make up your own minds on how you feel these different technologies differ. And it may be that you've created an all singing and dancing spreadsheet system which does exactly what you want. What I would always say is that having that embedded data is not impossible within spreadsheets, but it takes a lot of maintenance if you are building that sort of within spreadsheets itself. So feel free to take a look at that PDF. Just gives a bit of an oversight really. And this bottom section here sort of weighs it all up and sums it all up. It's looking at balance factors. It's thinking about the difference between having control and flexibility of that system. Obviously, you want that sort of rugged structure of a system there. You want that control, but you want the flexibility to actually change it when you need to. That automation of tasks and steps versus where do we need to apply our professional judgment? It's balancing those two things as well. And then the standardization versus customization of steps and templates and so on. How do each of those technologies allow you to do that sort of thing? So yeah, that's it in a nutshell, a comparison between that I wanted to talk about. Now, if I just stop sharing my screen for a bit. Really, in terms of an overview and conclusion of what we're talking about here, obviously, and I'm sure from your own experience, you'll know that all of these systems work. I'm not saying that one's, the one you have to go with by any means. What I would say is that, yeah, the systems work. We get our VAT returns filed on time. We get our year-end accounts and self-assessment filed on time, or generally, unless the client gives problems with late data and all that. But How easy is that process of getting to the finish line? How much stress is involved? And can we really resolve those bottlenecks? First of all, identifying where those bottlenecks are within our systems and working out, well, is there something that can help us with that bottleneck reduction? So whether it be bringing the data closer to the system itself, as I've hopefully sort of shown here on this talk, or whether it's something else. So it's taking a step back from the business and it's thinking about, okay, before we start 1st of April or 6th of April now, the system, the process goes round again. We do the same thing again, groundhog year again. What can we do within our own firms to improve those bottlenecks and make sure that what happened last year doesn't happen next year?
Mm.
And
Thank you
that's it.
very much. No, it's really useful. Can I ask, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, so you might need to take a minute to do something in the background. Would you be able to, because I think most people on the call will be preparing some form of year end, whether that's a company year end, an individual's year end. Are you able to show us, as an example, using Xenon, what that would look like if you've connected, they've given you their zero data, maybe you're not the bookkeeper all year round. If I connect their zero to my Xenon, what am I expecting to see come out of it?
Yeah, sure. Let's just get logged in the background here.
Sorry,
No, it's
thank you.
okay.
In the background, while you're doing that, do you think it's something we should be pricing into our services to cover the cost of this software? Or do you think this software gives back so much in time and efficiency that it covers the cost of itself?
Great question. We've got customers that do it both ways. Some see it as an internal cost because it improves their internal flow within their own systems. And some say, well, actually, the client's getting value from this because I'm doing my work faster as an accountant or bookkeeper.
Yeah.
And also, some firms provide a data health check to some
Yes.
clients and charge for that
Mhm.
process. I was talking to one the other day on a podcast episode I was recording, and they charge £400 to.
I think I know that person because I was shocked and I said, do people pay that? People pay £400 to find out the health of their data. And they're like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he does it quite nicely because if they come on board as a client, he sort of redacts that fee and takes it off them and credit
Yeah.
notes it, sort of thing. So it's quite a nice way of doing it, really. Yeah, I'll start sharing my screen.
Thank you.
So this is the main core Xenon Connect, and it's this main health check, which we've had for a number of years now. We've been building on this over the years, whereby you would connect your Xero organization, and you can do that in 5 clicks, including the initial authentication. And it gets you to this health check screen whereby you can see the data quality of the bookkeeping for a specific period. And it changes instantly when you change the period there in the health score. Really quickly, in respect of these 25 specific bookkeeping checks. So things like unreconciled bank items, old unpaid bills, invoices, credit notes that are unattached, miscoded accounts, sort of bills and invoices and so on. Lots of different things that you can probably see down the left-hand side here that we check for. And again, we do these things manually, and it works when we do it manually. We review things within the ledgers themselves, and we get the job done. It's the same sort of thing. Does it speed up the process to get a tool in which identifies these things based on set parameters, set rules that are ingrained in the double entry bookkeeping system themselves? So, for example, if an invoice is unpaid and received by the customer after 60 days, does that mean it's something you have to look into? Are we missing a payment, a deposit there? Or does it have to be written off as a bad debt? Or does the client need to chase it again? It's these sorts of things that are tied in directly based on those rules of what is the norm for a transaction, that flags these issues up really quickly. So there's this area, and then there's systemise, which is a new module, which is we've got various templates, so you don't have to build out your systems from scratch. So we have things for VAT returns, like we saw in the screenshot before. That was this sort of screen, whereby you can see where things are up to, and you've got different preparers and reviewers in there as well. But if I take a step back to the templates, I suppose at the moment, in respect of your question, Donna, the management accounts, for example, for a limited company might be useful. We're rolling out a year-end specific check soon, but it'll be very much like the management accounts, but with some extra added compliance element to it as well. But you can see here that it goes through the steps, reconcile bank account, and so on. All the things that you tend to do when you're doing the management accounts or year-end. Add debts review. And you can see these boxes in the middle. That's where we tied it into either those data check, health checks within Xenon, or the blue boxes, which are review pop-ups. So, for example, it could show you the top 20 items, bills that are based on value with a specific tax code straight away without having to go those 5, 6, 7 clicks to get to that report within the ledger itself. It pops up instantly when you click it because all the data is held in Xenon as well, because it pulls it in when it does the data checks anyway. So it's what we're talking about is embedding that data directly into the checklist, and that's what we're doing here.
So when it says obviously reconcile bank accounts, is that button, obviously it's doing a bank balance check, is that button actually saying I'm going to tick it, say I've done it, or is it tick it? Oh, that's just the template for it.
So that's yes. So when we get to the task level, like this one here, let's say, this links and it shows you how many issues there are. So, for example, bank balance check, we can see there's 4 bank accounts. If I click on that, it shows the 4 bank accounts in this 0 account that we're looking at that are not reconciled currently. So in this case, you would go into 0 and actually reconcile those items as you would normally do. And then you would go back and you would mark it as prepared on that particular step there. And if there are issues remaining, you click prepared, it will tell the team member that, are you sure you want to mark this as prepared because it hasn't been complete yet? It's that extra level of detail that's possible because the data is tied in with the checklist itself.
Yes, that makes sense. And in terms of, obviously, you mentioned the health check, there are firms using softwares like this before they get into the sticky business of actually doing the work to utilize this as a tool to assess data quality and therefore be able to potentially give a better fee quote because they can physically demonstrate to a client, your data is rubbish. This is going to take me years to unpick. And you seem to think you're some kind of high-flying financial accountant, and no, definitely not.
Yeah, exactly that. And it takes the emotion out of the conversation, doesn't it? Because you're not saying, okay, your bookkeeping is rubbish as a client or a previous accountant. What you're saying is these specific issues need to be dealt with, who's going to do it and at what cost. So it leads that conversation on to, in conjunction with the pricing, the transaction count data that we have here for all clients as well, that ability to price really quickly and powerfully and provide reports branded with your firm that builds trust with that prospect or that existing client from the word go, essentially.
Have you got a demo, just a demonstration of what that health check can look like?
Yeah, so let's just say we got to this within 5 clicks of authenticating this particular 0 client. If I choose a period I want to run off a health report for, let's say the last 12 months, or let's make it more realistic, the last year end. If I click download here, I can add some backing schedules as well.
Oh, nice.
This has been added recently, the backing schedules. Download report. Let's load that report. This would be your firm's logo in the top right. This is your color scheme, your primary color of your branding. It's a very simple, plain English. These are the problems we found with your bookkeeping. There's no mention of Xenon Connect in this report at all. It's coming from you and your firm. This is the health score, and this is why we've allocated this health score to it, because of these particular issues. There's 25 specific types of bookkeeping data checks we do. So it's a nice summary, and then now you can also attach the detailed listings of those issues as well behind the scenes on the extra pages here as well, if you want to give that extra level of detail to clients.
That's amazing. I can see personally how that would really help as a start of a base of a relationship, to be able to say, this is why your fee would be this, or this is what it could be if you clean all this up, or this is what we would need and you'd need to pay us to get it. There's a lot of different options, and it can go down to the base, the real transactions that are in question in order to demonstrate that, rather than just, well, the feel we're getting from this is.
Yeah, and it's giving the client the choice, or the prospect the choice, isn't it? What they want to do about it. They can improve the things themselves, but these are the things they need to improve, or we can bring it in house as a firm and we can charge you this to do that. But it's things like, there's a couple of key checks that if you're doing these with prospects, it's really valuable for them and also for your firm. So things like, if I just broaden this period here, first of all, an opening balance differences check. How often do we take on clients and we quote them, and then we get started on the work, and then 3 months down the line we realize actually the balance sheet from the previous financial year doesn't match the bookkeeping in terms of what's been filed. So this check here compares the reserves figures in the statutory accounts automatically from the Companies House API with the bookkeeping ledgers reserves. So if there's a difference there, an adjusting difference, it would flag up here and you'd be able to review those late transactions there. So that's one example that it's a hidden error, essentially, that
Yes.
we just wouldn't have the time to actually dedicate to prospects that level of a review. So it's having the ability to do that at that stage early on as well. And then the other one I just want to mention briefly is also, let's have a look, multi-tax suppliers. When there's a lack of consistency with the VAT code that's been used for a particular supplier of your client, like is the case here with Bill's Computers,
Yeah.
we normally claim back input VAT, but we can see this top item is outside the scope. So it looks like they've underclaimed input VAT. If you can spot that by going down to check with a prospect after you've plugged Xenon into their ledger and find some VAT that you can save them at that first or second meeting, why wouldn't they choose you as their advisor? You'd already saved them money.
Game changer. Kirsty's asked a question. She said in the chat, the heart that shows in 0 when the extension is on, is that a live feed and updates when you clear things, or does it need to then be resynced?
Yeah, so great question, Kirsty. Every time you refresh the page in 0, if you've got browser extension added, it will pull it in from Xenon at that point in time. So it requests essentially the health score from Xenon every time the page loads in 0 behind the scenes. So yeah, so it will keep up to date with what Xenon's showing, and it will be the period that you have selected in your main Xenon exact period selection here. So it won't be necessarily what you're seeing currently. If you change the date up here, it'll be your default period that it shows the health score for.
Did anyone else have any questions for Gareth while we're here on either how the system works or how he would structure things in his firm as it was before? Oh, it's quiet. You've answered all the questions, Gareth.
I'm very wary. I didn't want that to become a sales call. Hopefully,
No, it's not. But I think it's a difference between there's so many systems out there that unless you at least even see something, it's quite hard to picture. Well, what am I actually paying for? What is the benefit? Whether you choose yourself or another system, the theory is they do the job the same way. They may charge different prices. They may have certain different, abilities and that. But to have, I think a lot of firms, especially when they start out and it is just them and it is just on a spreadsheet. And then they've got to move somewhere, and you have got like your Asanas and stuff, which are very generic, and as you said, they serve a purpose. But again, they're not connected enough to really be powerful. So where do you go? And at least if you can see a demonstration like you've just given us there of a specific system that is built for accountants and bookkeepers, then that's quite different to just going, oh, I'm going to type these tasks on the Asana, every single one for every single client, because everyone's slightly different. Because presumably you can tweak on and off, like you can change the importance of things as it is for you in your firm. And you can say, I don't want to see, I don't know, transactions under a certain value, and there's lots of tailoring you can make in the system.
Yeah, we've made it so that it loads default settings when you first sync it so that you can just get started without any sort of having to do anything. However, you can behind the scenes if you choose to tweak it at a practice level or at individual client level as well.
Kirsty, can I ask, you are using, obviously, you're clearly using, oh, sorry, she's on the phone. Bad example. All right, let's go somewhere else. Fiona, you've been aware and used Xenon, haven't you? Because I know you've used it with me. Do you find it a useful tool, or is there anything about it that you potentially
I
would?
actually do find it a useful tool. You mentioned another piece of software, which is basically just a task list,
Yes.
as opposed to something that gives you your tasks and also shows you where you need to look to complete some of those tasks. So I think that's brilliant. I'm actually looking at one right now, and and one of the ones that you've given me, we took it, I think, from a health score of like 68 up to 83 just by running through and checking those issues and resolving them, which if we were to look through Zero, QuickBooks, whatever, on a manual scale, that would take so much longer, and the time cost would just be incredible.
And that's the thing, I think it's quite motivational as well. If you can take a 0 from somebody, be it a new client or you just take it on within your practice or whatever, and you can see that the health score changes by you making differences, it can be quite motivational to staff. And I know that there are practices where they've implemented it. And I've said to them, well, why don't you set it almost like a leaderboard for your team? You know, who can get most of their clients into the 90% level or
Yeah.
and things like that. And they've used it to reward staff, to motivate staff, to challenge them. And also it gives them a really brief overview without having to dig into every client and go, well, where are we at with the bookkeeping? They can just go zip, 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 zip. Oh, why is that one so far out?
Yeah, you did talk earlier, Donna, about an integration with the other piece of software that we use for the tasks.
Yeah, an engager.
So, it would be great if you could kind of see them together.
It's
Obviously, there may be a challenge with that, but it would be great that if you opened one and you saw sort of everything there, that would be awesome. Um, because you don't really want to be doing tasks in this one and tasks in that one because it kind of feels like you are duplicating.
Yeah, I did actually have this discussion with Gareth just before we come on the call and saying
Mm,
how I think once we know that we've got Xenon set to do what we need it to do,
mm,
you would potentially change your engager to be step one and request records, step two, complete the Xenon
mm,
tasks, and then come back to say confirm to client because you wouldn't need all those steps in a separate system if they're already within the Xenon system, which makes the most sense because that's the one connected to the client data.
correct. Yeah, because I did find in that other piece of software, which I shan't name, that you have to change your view to be able to complete a task and move it to the next person. So that wasn't very clear. It's clear now.
Can I pick on you, Fred? I know that you're a big fan of the spreadsheet in systemizing your practice. How do you feel when you see a system like this? Is it something where you go, no, 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 it's not bespoke enough, or you're on mute? You're on mute. Can I unmute? Ask to unmute. There we go. There he goes.
Hello, can you hear me
Hello, I can hear you now.
now? um, yeah, I mean, my system is sort of uh, it's built on experiences from working in other practices, and in fact, it sort of mimics the automated nature of some progress reports that I've seen in other softwares over the years. So there is a certain amount of science and experience that's gone into it, and it's evolved over time. I suppose one thing for me is I'm almost trying to move away from having so many deadlines by getting other people to do the more deadline heavy work, if you see what I mean. So what use I'd have for it, I don't know, but at the same time, the practice continues to grow. There is always a core of compliance work, which of course is deadline driven. So this sort of thing, which is shareable, and live and whatnot is something that would appeal actually, because a spreadsheet's only as good as the users,
Mhm.
and there's an awful lot more room for user error in something that isn't linked, like what I use. So it would be how something like Xenon or some sort of management software like that, how deeply it is integrated, because I wouldn't want to become a slave to it, whilst at the same
Yeah,
time I do want to use the functionality that it has.
yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Can I just jump in, Donna, with that?
Of course,
That's a
please do.
great point, Fred. And what I would say is that although it is the templates, for example, in Xenon, we've got currently compliance-based things. We've very much got the idea that obviously the tax consultancy, which is more of an advisory side of things, that will be building workflows, and you could certainly make them anyway, whereby let's say you've got an R&D workflow or something, or you've got maybe capital allowances or something else, or maybe high level tax planning. You can link those individual micro steps to specific nominal codes within the ledgers
Hmm.
themselves, and it will tell you, for example, how many items there are, for example, and a quick way of reviewing specific nominal codes directly. So you could maybe systemize that for other team members to go through potentially in the future and do things the way that you wanted to in respect to the advisory side of things as well.
Yeah, okay, that'd be useful. Yeah.
Do you charge for doing data reviews or anything like that in your practice, Fred? Do you? Ever say,
Um,
I'll charge you £400 to tell you if your zero is any good?
well, I don't because I don't do data reviews, I suppose, really.
But potentially, would it be if you had a new client who wanted to come on board, you have to manually go in and check their zero, or do you take it on face value, or do you have caveats in your, I'll do it, assuming your records are okay and your bank balances,
Yeah,
and
I think that's one of the things actually. When I do a fee quote for a client
yeah,
and I say I'll do this, that, and the other, and there is always the caveat in that quote that says the quality and timeliness of the information being delivered, and then I can make a judgment as to whether I'm doing too much or whether I throw it back to them, or whether there's scope to say, look, you're giving me an absolute pile of manure here. And I suppose really, whilst I can't think of a specific example, it wouldn't surprise me if over the years I've engaged with it. Now I can think of an example, actually. Obviously, I'm not going to name the person, but I can think of someone that came along. I wouldn't say they said their data and records were perfect, but they were so bad I just couldn't do the work for them in the end, actually.
really,
Yeah, that was taking a manual overview of their information when the time came. Whether using something like Zen, I could actually go in and be much more scientific and say, look, your data is this percentage, got this percentage integrity. These are the areas that you need to tidy up. This is go away, do it yourself, go away, find someone else to do it, or I'll bill you to do it. I've never got that much into the weeds of what they do. It tends to have been it's either good enough or it's not, or I'll fumble through, or I'll find, I don't know, an accountant's best friend to perhaps do some of the work for me. But yeah, so no, to answer the question, I've not been that scientific. If this software could come out granular and say, right, X, Y, and Z, this is what we need to do, then obviously there'll be some use and value in that.
Mm. And in terms of pricing, Gareth, I'm not saying that, oh, how much does it cost? But in terms of if, for example, we have all these people that come to us and go, hey, would you quote me for doing this? And we wanted to obviously assess the data. Is it possible within Xenon to connect them, pull your report to decide if they're going to be a good client, bad client, need help or not? But then if they don't come on board because they totally disagree with us because their records are beautiful and they will be wanting to pay £20 a year for their fee, that you could just delete that client out of Xenon so that you're not presumably holding licenses for clients that are then obviously not coming on board.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, first of all, you can add one free organization for life. Every firm can. So anybody
Yes.
that's in practice can do that. And you won't be able to delete that one and replace it for obvious reasons. However, for 20 quid a month, the starter package gives you 5 more licenses and you can roll organizations in and out as you please. There's no, the current limit is 5 at any one point in time,
Yeah.
but you can take them off.
But the theory being, if you were a bookkeeper working all year round, you'd want them connected all year round. If potentially you were more of a year-end accounts preparer who doesn't do any of the bookkeeping, presumably you would just utilize your licenses as you're needing them as you're doing your accounts prep.
Yeah, some do, some don't. Some like to have that view all year round. So for pre-year end planning, to send out a health report
Yes.
to client as well, and also just having the transaction count monitoring because
Yes.
it monitors whether the scope creep and they've gone up in terms of transaction count or turnover. So it lets you tell a client early that to expect the price increase, for example.
Nice, 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 nice. Sorry, can I, Kirsty, are you available? Hello. Sorry, I was chatting away to you earlier without realising. I thought, well, she looks like she's speaking. Maybe she doesn't realise she's on mute, but you're on the
Sorry,
phone.
phone, yes.
Apologies. Obviously, I can see from the chat that you're clearly using Xenon at the moment.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could get an extension on for Zero. I'm really
Oh, I love it. So sweet.
Gareth, what have you done
And
to me?
coming soon for Zero, didn't you say? For QuickBooks, didn't you say?
Yeah, all the other 3 as well. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So in terms of how you find, how do you tend to use it in your practice? Is it part of your system that everyone who comes on is connected to it, or how does it work for you?
Yeah. I haven't got everybody connected to it. So some of the littler ones, they're like, they're enough that you can keep an eye on them anyway. Yeah, it's certainly before a VAT return. I haven't actually done the systemise thing yet. I know it's there and I need to get switched on with it. But I was doing a year end the other night, so definitely ran it through and made sure that when it picks up the two small assets, it says, are you sure this is meant to be an expense, not an asset? Or I love the kind of where not us necessarily, but a client might have paid, but also got the bill on, and it spots those and sort of says, are you sure? And you go, no, thank you very much for that. I haven't noticed that one. Quietly fix that one. So yeah, it's definitely something to, as a reassurance that, and it's so nice when it gets to 100%, you kind of go, damn good. but it's annoying on my own accounts are low because I've got, I don't know, something small outstanding, but it's making me not get my 100%. It's like,
That's true. Actually, it's one of the few ones on my own firm. I very rarely have 100% because there's always just something in the background. It's like, yes, I know what that is because it's me.
Well, it's like that cobbler's shoe thing, isn't it? We always do our own accounts last, So but it's just something. It's really nice to kind of keep an eye on and just. I haven't. I've tried it's difficult with the like taking on a new client when they don't necessarily want to tell their existing bookkeeper that they're leaving. So I did get somebody involved to basically sign up themselves as a client so they could run themselves through the health report and then share that with me. So then we were able to have a chat with, that's fixable with this and that's fixable, but without alerting the existing accountant. So that's a useful tip for those.
That's a really good one. I've never asked a client to sign themselves up in order to be able to access it.
Well, because you get it's free trial or something at the beginning, isn't it? So afterwards they could, move into us afterwards if they come on as a client. But just to kind of and also to sort of show them the worth of, actually it's only 63%. Why? What's my current accountant doing for me? It starts that conversation. Yeah, so it's really, really useful from that point of view.
Oh, there you go. Top tip from Kirsty. I hadn't thought about using it in that way, but it is, like you say, a really good way of bypassing it without alerting anyone else. Essentially what's going on with the system.
I have found, and Gareth won't mind me saying it because he knows, it works better for me with Xero than it does with my QuickBooks clients.
Everything works better with Xero, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Stop it! Don't be cruel.
Yeah, there are differences in the APIs of the third-party apps, whereby some things we can do, some things we can't, but generally the consistency is the same between two. But yeah, there are some differences.
Yeah. But yeah, I think certainly for those with team members to make sure that you can kind of see where your teams are up to. Mine's basically just me, but for those that want to make sure their team are following the same process every time, and to find out where they're up to with 90% of the way through that job, and that one's got its last 10%. Can we finish that? To kind of help focus the attention with a looming deadline. So I checked something with Gareth at the show. Your stand was so busy at Fab. Honestly, every time I walk past to ask a question, I'm like, no, it's fine. Mine's not important. You talk to new people. I'll catch up with you later type thing. But it's really busy.
Oh, no, that's really good. If anyone else has got any further questions for Gareth, ask them now. But if not, obviously connect with Gareth via LinkedIn.
Confessions of an Accountant, where no topic is off the ledger.